I'm back to my same old ways. I swear I try to change, but you just feel so right when I do wrong. So right along.
All right, so gentlemen, shout out to my clinician, guy by the name of Mike Dell, total sweetheart. He has been working with me for years on my mental health, my anxiety, and depression. And the best way I can describe Mike is one time I recommended a friend go to see him, and this friend called me up like immediately after. He was like, I don't know how you can spend time with that dude. He is so mellow, he freaks me out.
Yeah.
And he is, man, he is the most mellow dude, and he's a beautiful human being. And he gave me a metaphor that I've used both with students and parents, and it helped me tremendously. And I wanted to share it with you to get your clinical take on this metaphor. He refers to anxiety as the guard dog. And he said, picture a guard dog. What is its job? Its job is to keep you safe. He says, all right, so what happens with your anxiety, dude, is that your guard dog is in there, and that's the thing that keeps you from like blithely stepping off the sidewalk into the street. And that's the guard dog barks when you're about to drink some expired milk, or you're about to, go outside during a lightning storm or whatever, right? Unfortunately, some of us have guard dogs that just bark at everything. And for many, many years, I felt so much shame and frustration towards my anxiety that I would try to put it in a box. I would try to box it up and put it away because I felt like I shouldn't be feeling this. I shouldn't be afraid. I shouldn't be spinning. I shouldn't be scared. There's something wrong with me. I'm deficient. I'm defective. And I would take my guard dog and I would put it in a freaking box and try to put it away. But you guys know what happens when you take a dog that's supposed to be doing a job and you put it away. It does not calm down. It only starts doing what?
Eating the couch.
That's right. Just freaking out. And so I had this thing where, I won't go into details, but basically I would lie awake at night when my boys were 1 or 2 years old, and I would just be terribly afraid that they were sick with something. And it was not based on any logic. They were not showing anything. I was just every night for hours convinced, until finally Mike coached me. He's like, well, why don't you ask your guard dog what he's barking about? And I will never forget. I'm laying in bed and I sort of whisper the words. I'm like, what's up, buddy? What you barking about? And just saying that to my guard dog, 70% of the barking went away. And he was like, oh, Dad, you're talking to me? You're not going to make me go in the cage? And I was like, nah, come on out, dude. I'm like having this conversation. My wife blissfully asleep. And I'm like, buddy, what are we barking about? And he's like, I think the boys are sick. And so I say, all right, well, listen, if it's really a problem, I'll take off of work tomorrow. We'll take him to the pediatrician. And again, my anxiety, right? My guard dog was so confused that I was honoring him and taking him seriously. Was the next answer I got was, no, man, I don't think we got to go tomorrow. I was like, all right, well, how about this? Tomorrow morning, we're going to write down every question you have. They've got a wellness visit in about a month. I will ask every question you have. And when I made that promise to him, and then I followed through on it, man, he stopped barking about it. And while my anxiety is very much like that sound wave, like we were talking about in the depression episode, generally speaking, I have such a better working relationship with my anxiety because I conceive of it as this guard dog, and my relationship with my guard dog has improved.
I think the working relationship with your anxiety piece is huge. And whether that's around, for me, the thing that pops up is test anxiety for students, right? We have so many students who dyslexic, ADHD, experientially go in to take a test and they just shut down and haven't. had the opportunity to learn how to have that conversation with their anxiety, because there is an appropriate amount of anxiety that comes when you're about to take a test. There's also an inappropriate amount of anxiety that comes when you're going to take a test.
Yep.
And if you're so activated in that moment that you can't access the information you need to access, that you've studied and that you've mastered and that you've memorized and that you've cataloged in your head, and then all of a sudden you go in there to take that test and you go lizard brain, then you can't find any of that.
Oh man, particularly when you throw shame and frustration on top of that.
Well, and historically, when you talk about shame and frustration, like ADHD, dyslexia 101, like you can't read. Oh, that's not good.
Right.
Now I have to go and now I have to go and take this test. Oh, that's not good. And it's the, I use this example all the time. It's the test where the question is, which of these 4 things is not accurate? And as a person who struggles with reading and processing speed, I have had experientially those moments where I answer the question, I'm like, got it, but I missed the not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then I'll go back and read through the test, and everything's good. I turn it in and like blow it out. You get like 2. Like, what happened? I'm like, I guess I just read the questions wrong. So I think having those conversations gives you the opportunity to be able to know, oh, when I get to one of those questions, then I can say, okay, wait, hold on. What am I worried about? Oh, I'm worried about missing the not. And then you can like just circle the question and come back to it later. And eventually what ends up happening is that this is my test taking strategy at this point, right? Is all of the ones that I know I'm going to have to read twice are just circled. And I go through all the other ones, and then I go back. I'm like, okay, these are all the bullshit questions.
But it sounds like you had to have an honest conversation with yourself about where you're at, own it, but that then must have helped you dissipate a measure of test anxiety because you had a strategy.
I was never anxious when I took tests.
Okay.
Largely because impulse control at that point was really not a thing. So I would just blow through the tests, and when I'd get done with them and I'd fail them, I'd be like, well, I guess I just didn't know the information.
I just love the idea of like little Nathaniel just Tasmanian deviling his way through a test.
C, A.
Right? 100%. Mm-hmm. And like, you don't know, especially as a kid. But then when you're older and you can develop these strategies, right? Like, and this is part of that, 19 to 24-year-old, why I love to work with college students piece, because they have the capacity to be able to do that. And it may be that you've been in a space where what people have been telling you to do as far as how you take tests or how you read material or how you gain information is not accurate, right? It's like, if you could just sit and focus, well, then I wouldn't
fly.
I wouldn't, exactly. I could fly. And it's just not always the case.
So it's interesting because this guard dog, right? Like, I think I've made peace with my guard dog, so much so that he barks and I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Scratch behind the ear.
I appreciate
That
that.
I feel like that's the idea. That's what I strive for. I think that all of our listeners out there who are grappling with anxiety, I think that you just described where we're hoping to get to.
Well, and so this is what I talk to my first responders about when I do trainings, and it's the idea of, so there's my dog and it goes off, starts barking, and I go and I pat it, I rub its ears, everything else. And then I get a chance to take a look around, and then I get to tell the guard dog, it was nothing, no big deal. The evidence there for me is that I want the alert, period, the end.
Yeah.
That's what it's there for. But as soon as I go and check on it, rub its ears, give it a little pat, and look around, and if there's nothing there, move on. So when I work with my first responders, you got to accept that dog is there and it's valuable, right? It's incredibly valuable. You have to acknowledge the bark. But if by the bark you're already pissed off because you didn't want to hear the bark, then we're not utilizing the guard dog. So if I rub its ears and everything, I look around and things are array, then I need to go and I need to do something with that. If I'm going to go and do something with that, the last thing that I want to be is in a place where my emotions are so high that I don't have judgment. So I want my guard dog to let me know that there is warning and caution. And I want to recognize that that warning and caution should have some kind of meaning for me. So when we talk about it, I talk about red, yellow, green. And these are all systematically colors where you're either, there is true caution and you have to pay very serious attention to this thing, or there is caution. You don't necessarily need to pay the utmost attention, but you need to recognize that there is caution. And then the green is, and I'll say this kind of defining it, is I have all my senses. I'm able to smell, hear, see, whatever it might be, so that I have really good judgment. And if I stay very compelled to move from whatever color to green, I continue to make better judgment calls. So I can go towards caution, but I have intention to move it back towards green. So I rub the dog on the ears, take a look around, nothing. Okay, we're back in green. But the guard dog has to be rewarded, right, for giving you that signal in the first place. It has to be then your intention, in my opinion, right, in my clinical opinion, I have to be cognizant of where that color is, what color I'm in, because if there's nothing there but I'm in red and it takes me a while to come back, my red has now bleeded into my green or my yellow. And so I have to find evidence in my scenario. Am I safe or am I not? Because if I'm not safe, that's great. Then those colors make sense. But if I'm safe and there's no evidence, why am I still in the yellow? Why am I still in the red? So I already rubbed my dog's head. Why am I still here? Why is this thing still going off?
There's another piece of it too. When you talk about the red, yellow, and green, one of the things that pops up for me is that the blinking red light.
Yeah,
like it never changes.
Warning.
Right? It's always like that, and so you get so activated that it's consistently red. Right? It's off for a second, it's back on, off, on, and that puts you in that space where we were talking about the pruning, right, and the trees and the development, but in your brain, that's what happens as well. And if you are consistently in that space of always on edge, always looking at that blinking red light, that's what you're looking for. That's what you have conditioned yourself to see over and over and over and over again.
So this is this piece where we were talking a little bit about, hey, if this is my baseline, then what do I do with that baseline? How do I change that, alter it, whatever? And for me, it's always been lifestyle, right? Like if my guard dog is so ready and looking for things to bark at, then I have to find a way. I'm gonna hang out with my guard dog a little bit more, and we're just gonna start loving on each other, right? And we're gonna love on each other until people are walking by and we're not barking anymore, right? We're gonna love on each other until I take him on walks and there's no barking. I'm going to expose him to more things and get my guard dog to a place where it starts to feel more safe, because I don't want that to be my baseline. But I need to accept that there's some time and effort to spend with my guard dog to create that lifestyle of saying, I don't want the red light. I'm not looking for that anymore. This is no longer my condition.
Right. And I think what you're speaking to is that ultimately, it's, I hesitate to, I don't even want to use the word responsibility. I would rather say it's your opportunity. You have the opportunity to help your guard dog get to where you need them to be.
I would use responsibility.
I totally would. Agree 100%.
Okay. So I guess I would. All right. So tell me about responsibility. This is interesting.
You first or me?
I think it's your responsibility to understand the way that you work in the world, and for me, that's and it obviously, like ADHD, learning disabilities is that's my lane, right? And I've over the years have had enough interactions with folks that there are always, not always, there are those individuals who will say, well, I can't do this because X, right? Well, I'm not responsible because I was just being impulsive. Yeah, but you're still responsible for it.
That's a really interesting,
Right.
that resonates with me a lot. The idea that it's not only me who is living with my anxiety. Everyone is. My students, my wife, my children, my parents, my sister, all the people who are incredibly close to me, and the person who's in line with me at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Shout out Safeway, Downing and Evans. But indeed, I think so. I embrace responsibility. Then you're right, because I'm not an entity unto myself. I also am going through this world.
Yeah.
Well, and so I think the beauty of that is to say, I talk about with my veterans a lot things like what I call emotional leadership, right? And so emotional leadership is being responsible for whatever it is that you're doing, right? So are you responsible enough to be authentic? Are you responsible enough to say, I'm sorry to my people whenever I misbehave and in a way that I don't want to behave, right? My anger does this thing to me. You guys didn't deserve that. This is me letting my anger, come out in ways that I don't want it to. And I think that responsibility, if you're able to do those things, then you're practicing emotional leadership, meaning that you can be as emotional as you want to be, right? I'm not asking you not to be emotional, but you're really going to have to, if you really want to engage with that emotion, engage with it. Excuse yourself from everybody else, right? And this is a part of the battle drill that I've talked about before, is like this idea of like, hey, I have to have a plan for this. So if I get emotional, right, I need to go and soothe that guard dog. We need to go and hang out.
Yeah.
Right. And it's nobody else's responsibility to go and hang out with me when I'm hanging out with my guard dog. I need to go and get with that guard dog, and we need to go and frolic and play and whatever else. Then I could come back and be like, all right, guys, sorry, my bad. You guys should not have had to, my responsibility, be a part of that. Right. So I'm going to continue to work to say like, hey, whatever you did or whatever the environment did to me, it's my responsibility to manage that. So love you guys. I'm going to go and play with my guard dog. I'll be right back. If you guys don't want to play with me, that's on you, but I'm going to take the responsibility to go and play with my dog.
I think that the timing is perfect, because there's that piece that we just had with Steve, right, with the Dogs of War, and he one of the things is like you're not training the dog, you're training the person, and we're training ourselves, right? Like we're in this space where if you don't take care of your dog, what happens? He eats the couch. Yeah. Right? If you don't take care of your own emotional experience, what happens? You eat yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah. And then everyone around you, both those close to you and those that you're walking through free society with, that's everyone then is a recipient of that.
Well, and I think there's this piece too, if we're going to use the dog analogy, because I think it's kind of fun, is that if you give attention to the dog when it's doing something bad, it's going to continue doing something bad.
Yep.
But I think, when I learned the method, it was like you kind of fold your arms and you turn your back to the dog, right? And then all of a sudden the dog's like, man, what do I do to get attention? And then all of a sudden it just sits there nice and pretty, like waiting. And then you go to pet it. It's like, oh, that's what I need to do, is just sit here nice and calm and by your side. And then after that, it does that. And again, the reward is like, yeah, here we go. I will soothe you by petting you. And it's like, okay, so that's what my guard dog should be. Okay, got it. Right. And when appropriate, attention. When not, no.
Right. And it's funny because you were talking about like, I'm going to go over, pet the guard dog and look around. And what I liked about what you were describing is sometimes your guard dog was right. Sometimes like that, tent wasn't put down correctly and that thing was going to fall over on some kids. So good job, guard dog. Let's go put a 15-pound weight on that and like keep that where it needs to be.
And that also goes back to the boxes, right? So in other words, like if you're going to go back and, sit with the dog and enjoy it for whatever it does, that means you're going to go to that box. You're going to open it up and say like, okay, I do kind of have to sit with this thing for whatever it is, right? And that takes a little bit of nourishing, a little whatever it might be. Like you have to spend time with that emotion. If you don't spend time with that emotion, you don't know who you are in that emotion. And until you learn who you are in that emotion, you are missing a piece of yourself.
So we've got a great guest today, longtime friend of yours.
Yes. Known him for probably maybe longer than you, which is saying something.
It is saying something, yeah.
And a guy that I've also gotten to know over, 12, 13 years now. So our guest today is mental health practitioner Craig Knippenberg.
Licensed clinical social worker, also a master in divinity. He's the most gentle human on the planet.
He is,
just
man.
So sweet.
And he's also someone who's a little bit of a podcast veteran himself. So, podcaster, published author, does great work. So when we come back from the great break, we'll have Craig Knippenberg in the hot seat, and we're going to get his take on good dog, the bad dog, anxiety. This is episode 7, Harder Than Healing. We'll be back after the break. All Points North is the official sponsor of the Harder Than Healing podcast. APN offers custom mental health, trauma, and addiction treatment programs at APN Lodge in Colorado. Visit apn.com to learn more. All right, we're back. It's episode 7, season 1 of Harder Than Healing. This episode, Good Dog, Bad Dog. It's the anxiety podcast. So in the first segment, we were sharing metaphors for anxiety. And I brought in my guard dog metaphor. Yeah. And now we're joined by friend of mine, longtime friend of Nathaniel Ellison. We've got Craig Knippenberg in the hot seat. Thrilled to have you. And
I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh,
Jason.
man. So I wonder if, Craig, we could start with us asking you, what is your metaphor for anxiety?
Well, I tend to see anxiety in a couple different ways, and I'll tie it into your dog one.
Okay.
But all of us, all humans, are born with an emotional temperament. And your temperament is the sort of one or two emotions that you tend to go to when you're stressed, or often wake up that way. You can also wake up that way. So to understand that, think of Winnie the Pooh. So Winnie the Pooh wakes up feeling what? Happy.
Yeah, man.
Right?
Every day.
And he hungry. So
Happy
he
and
goes
hungry, yeah.
on a walk through the woods to find some honey. And there's a rock he doesn't see, and he trips over the rock, and he gets scuffed up. But his happiness drops a little. He's a pretty happy fellow. And he gets up and brushes himself off, and he says, but there might be honey in a tree. And he's happy again, right? Now, the piglets, they're about a 6 on the 10 scale. Piglet's pretty happy, the little pig one.
Yeah,
right?
yep.
And Piglet goes for the walk, and he falls over the rock. And his happiness drops, and he said, walks are dangerous. I can't go on walks. I'll get hurt. I have to go home. And he's consumed with anxiety. And we know that some people are more anxious than others. They have a more sensitive amygdala, and it triggers anxiety compared to others. Now, if I could keep going, if you don't mind, I'll cover the other emotions.
Go.
So Rabbit, who's not the happiest fellow, very OCD, he starts on the path, and he falls down, and he says, stupid rock, I hate rocks. You're not my friend.
Somebody
And
put
he
that rock
throws
there.
It, kicks it, and the rest of the walk, he's mad and enraged and just yells at all the rocks.
Yep.
Right? And then you have our friend Eeyore, who comes along, and he falls over the rock. And he says, even the rocks don't want to be my friend. And he goes along, and then there's another rock that doesn't want to be my friend, and on and on. And finally, at the end, Winnie the Pooh's like, but Eeyore, I'm your friend. And Eeyore says, yes, but no one wants to be my friend. So we all tend to fit in those. Now, the Tiggers of the world, they're like a 10 out of 10. And the Tiggers fall over the rock, and they say, that was great. I'm going to do it again. And they do it again, and they do it again, and they're bloody and bruised. And then it's getting dark, and they're like, that's the best walk I've been on in my life. So we do have the Tiggers of the world as well.
Or the Green Beret that's sitting on the mic next to us.
Am I a Tigger?
A little bit.
That's great. So you have to sort of think, and I always challenge parents, what's your temperament? What emotions do your kids go to? And if you're, like, I was born with Winnie the Pooh, just through and through, my whole life.
That is definitely true.
Until I was a mental health first responder at Columbine High School. And I got a lot of Piglet from that experience. And so I experienced secondary trauma, worked with those kids for months and months, and it forever rewired my brain. To this day, I've been started on antidepressants, took about 3 months to kick in, was very effective. And I just decided I'd just take a little low dose every day, just keep the edge off, because the anxiety and depression through that experience really kicked up. And it's very common. You'll see people get anxious, and then it grows, and then they feel hopeless. And once you hit the hopeless point, then you get depressed, right? Things are never going to be different, whatever. And I've still not reclaimed my ability to fall asleep naturally, which I had my whole life. And it just rewired my brain. So your temperament plays a role, then your life experiences. So if you had traumatic experiences, that's going to impact sort of your genetic predisposition or your temperament. I get the Winnie the Pooh from my mother. She's 90, she just turned 97. Happy every day.
Mazel tov.
She is she's something else. And then you have your culture. And today's culture is for teenagers and kids. It's gigantic. And so they've been tracking anxiety and depression in teens since the 1950s. And through my training for first 30 years, it was always considered to be about 20% of teens have depression and or anxiety. They did notice a little jump every decade, and they related to that to the Cold War, that the existential angst of the Cold War really was making kids more anxious and depressed. Then we had this big jump from like 20 to 40% in the 2010s. And the main factors there were the academic stress. All these parents wanting their kids to go to Stanford, to get into Harvard. And the schools, more and more homework, more and more studying. So academic stress and social media. And so social media, we started seeing that rise from that. And in 2019, pre-COVID, in Colorado, we reached our highest rates of teen suicide that year in 2019. I dealt with 3 of them personally. It was the worst year of my career. Well, then COVID hit. The numbers kept going up. And we hit about 60%. I just read yesterday, a couple of days ago, in the United States, we hit an all-time high of death by suicide for adult and teens, just under 50,000 people in 1 year. And mental health needs for our teens are just astronomical. And then you throw in climate change, right? The kids are all anxious about that. But those are big drivers. And shootings. Oh, the shootings, guns, those have really blasted the whole rates of anxiety. And you can take a kid who is pretty much Winnie the Pooh, and they start to show ER Piglet just from enough exposure to that.
One of the things I've always enjoyed about Craig is the ability to be able to give us those types of definitions and to really kind of make it more palatable and accessible for folks. So the Winnie the Pooh piece and the Tigger piece and the Eeyore reality of it is that we all know a Winnie the Pooh. And ironically enough,
You are too. Can I tell a story about him? This is the greatest story ever.
Please.
So Nathaniel started working for me when he was a grad student. And he started working with the little preschool children.
I don't know where this is going.
And he'd have a little preschool group with the kids, and the moms would all wait out in the waiting area. And one day, one of the moms came up to me and she said, "Mr. Knippenberg, Nathaniel, all us moms want to take them home in a little bottle. And when we're stressed and yelling at our children, we just want to open it up, and Nathaniel would just come out and they'd settle right down." So he is the parent Buddha. And the mothers wanted me to bottle them. I could have made a fortune if I could have done it. But yeah, you are the walking Buddha. You always have been.
That's very sweet, Craig. Thank you. Well, and that's one of the things that I was saying to Sarah when we were coming back up here, is that you have that presence, right? And I think part of what it is that we've been talking a lot about on this podcast is how do we find that community? How do we foster that that sense of community, so that whether it's parents of children with ADHD, whether it's veterans, like then we have that shared community. And I think it's so difficult when you feel like you're the only person who's struggling with parenting or
for parenting, right? My next book coming out, I just turned it in, is called Shame-Free Parenting. That there's no reason to feel anxious about your parenting and guilt and shame, because the bar nowadays for parents is really high. There's stuff online on social media about you should never yell at your child because it would upset your attachment with them. Well, that is absolute, can I say BS? Is that okay?
We say bullshit on here pretty regularly.
That's bullshit, because attachment, human attachment is based on being close, but having disharmony and then repair. So this part is called rapprochement, and it's essential because when you do that, then you feel stronger. Your bond is stronger. It's not just all rainbows and butterflies.
Right.
And I never make mommy or daddy mad at me because I get everything I want anyway. Right. And so then they have these young parents get yelled at, oh, I'm a terrible parent. I'm not mindful enough. Like, you don't have to be. If you're 51% consistent, and parental consistency is important behaviorally with kids, 51% of the time, you're just fine. You're a good enough parent. You don't have to be over that.
I feel like a lot of my veterans need to hear that.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of them will, this whole irritability and anger with little to no provocation is a thing, right? That's the whole hallmark of PTSD. And so many of them are like wagging the finger at their kids and they lose it. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I feel terrible. I feel like I did this bad thing, and now I did lose that connection with my kids.
And I have a section in my new book on that. Now, I didn't mention vets in particular, but if you're an irritable parent yourself, you have to own it first. And you apologize for your mistake to your kid. And kids are incredibly forgiving, especially with their primary attachment figures. They really, and then they could even explain to them why they're a little bit more irritable, how they've sort of become rabbit after they were in service. Maybe they were Winnie the Pooh and now they're kind of a rabbit.
Well, and I think that's huge, right? Because a lot of the veteran population really doesn't want to accept sometimes that it's okay to feel as uncomfortable as they feel.
Yeah.
So they lash out at their kids or they lash out at whomever. And then after that, they feel bad about it. But they also don't want to recognize, like, hey, it's because I have this, high baseline of anxiety. I have this high baseline of hypervigilance. But if they were to just go to their kids and be like, hey, you know what, Dad's having a bad day. Kids got to have a bad day too, right? And
then all you have to do is explain it to them in a way the kid can understand. So with the little one, you just go, you know how you feel when you have to get a shot at the doctor's office? How nervous you got? Remember last time when you almost passed out? My daughter passed out twice when she was younger, by the way. Wow. Right in front of my friend. The doctor's my friend, and we're chit-chatting, and she went down. We're like, oh, bummer. But you can talk about, your tooth wiggles, and you're so scared, right? Well, sometimes, Daddy, that feeling comes to him or to Mom, that I just feel like I'm about to get a shot, and I'm very nervous. And so anything that stimulation around me might really trigger me because I'm on edge, right? And whatever works for your kid. So different kids have different responses to put them on edge. But I think sharing it is so important. And as one of the treatments is to share it with somebody else that can help you identify those feelings and not feel shame around it. Shame never helps anybody. Shame is only useful. It helps you change your behavior. Okay. Yeah. So there is a function of shame in evolution, and it's to change your behavior. When you share that with somebody, you're more likely to have support and change your behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And with anxiety, I'll give a little question for you three. I want all three of you to close your eyes.
All right.
And I want you to imagine something that makes you anxious.
Yeah.
Okay. Not too long. Did y'all find something?
Oh, yeah.
I heard an amazing quote. It was this violinist. I didn't catch her name, and she has an anxiety disorder. And she's written a new book. I heard it on NPR. And she said, anxiety is so easy to visualize and make it real. And so then you feel stupid for doing that, or you feel shame for that. But you all visualized it, didn't you? What made you anxious? It really is easy to visualize your anxieties.
Right. And it's not only the visualization of it, but it's also that visceral experience after you do it. Right. So like we close our eyes and it's like, okay, oh yeah, that's uncomfortable. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to sit in that space.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's perfect.
Because it just brings that all up, right? I know you've done a show on ADHD. Years ago, I was doing a group of adults with ADHD, and we were talking about negative and positive experiences. I had them visualize a positive experience from school. 1 out of 20 adults had one. Then I asked them to visualize a negative experience at school. Every hand was up.
Every single one.
And I'd call on them, and they'd be, oh, my teacher said I'd never amount to anything. I wasn't college material, right? And those hurts and pains really stick around.
Yeah.
And with anxieties, and the hard part with anxiety is once you start getting anxious, you just go down a rabbit hole.
Why is that? Like scientifically, like why does the brain do that?
Yeah. So anxiety is very much related to OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It's this obsessive thinking. Now, there's a function for it. So if the four of us were living, we're up here in Colorado in the mountains, okay? So we're Native Americans. It's 500 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay? And we have a nice little water place here in the mountains, and our teepees and our housing, and we go out and hunt, and but there might be predators, right? Because we are a prey species. So our amygdala, we are a fear-based species, and our amygdala, which triggers anxiety or anger, it's pretty sensitive for us because we're prey. So let's say Nathaniel, he goes out to get something over to the water spot, and he comes running back, and he's got some claw marks on him, and he comes running back 20 minutes later. Instantly, we are going to see on him major anxiety. We'll even smell the cortisol. So his cortisol is pumping. So my dad always used to say, a dog can smell fear. Well, humans do too. We smell that with each other because he's releasing cortisol, which we can smell. Now our heart rates are going up. What happened to you? What happened to you? Right? And then he says, well, I got attacked by a mama bear and her cubs. Okay? And then one of you says, well, where exactly was it? Okay, so now we're going a little deeper, right? And he's sorry. I got so casually relaxed, I forgot the microphone. Okay, I better have a little anxiety. So Nathaniel, you said, where exactly? And he says, well, by those 2 rocks over there by those aspen trees, right? And then somebody else is like, well, was it a brown bear or a black bear? And we're digging more to
because
find
the more
out
information we have,
then we can figure out, okay, we have seen that bear before. It was just moseying through with its cubs. It lives way on the other side of the hill. Probably got, just looking for berries. We don't have to worry. Or we haven't ever seen that one. Or that's an aggressive one, right? Then that will determine what we do. So obviously we're going to patch them up, but then we may go on a hunt for that bear, right, to protect us. And the brain, when you have your cortisol go off in a trauma or any kind of crisis, that cortisol etches things in your memory for about 2 hours afterwards. And that's protecting us because then Nathaniel will go, I ain't going over there again. Not until I know it's safe. Right? And you got your search party or whatever, but it's there the function is to keep us safe.
So let me ask this question. Oh, no, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I'm having a hard time. And here's the reason why. I know what anxiety is. And I know that I can get anxious. And I'll tell you really the only thing that I feel like can make me anxious is thinking my son is either in trouble, is in some way, shape, or form in harm's way.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can create, when you said to think about it and you can visualize it, and I think about the gala and maybe giving a presentation at the gala. And the only reason why I feel like I get anxious about that is because I'm wearing pants. Like that's for the audience. Like I always wear something, but it's definitely not pants. It's always shorts. And I don't like dressing up. So maybe if I'm dressed up, I can feel anxious. Don't really know why that is. But I don't register anxiety very well. And so when you're talking about figuring out the bear or this, the scenario, and I'm thinking like, I'm gonna go kill that thing, right? I'm gonna go get that thing.
That's the amygdala is anxiety and anger or fight or flight or freeze. So you may be more triggered to fight, right? Others might freeze. Others might flee.
So do you think there's a place in whether it's military training or crisis or that kind of stuff that you lose the other stuff? Because I don't know that there's a place.
I don't know if you lose it, but you enhance that fight response. And I'll tell you, I actually had an editorial published in the Wall Street Journal. This is like 20 years ago. And they wrote an article about characteristics of heroes, like people who had saved somebody like in a burning car, pulled them out, or super strength, lifted the car to get them out, but heroes that saved other people. And they came up with this list of like 8 qualities. They were firstborn, blah, blah, blah. They're leaders, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, I saw an asterisk. And I was like, this is such bullshit, because having been at Columbine, if you have never been trained, when your amygdala goes off, you don't know what you're going to do if you've never been trained. Kids flew out windows. Kids hid in spaces, some successfully, some not. Others might have tried to fight a little bit, right? You don't know what's going to happen. And this article was like making it sound like, oh, if you're this guy, you're going to be the hero, right? But the asterisk said 90% of the heroes had some type of military or police or firefighter training. And that is the essence of the training, right?
I see that.
My nephew is in Special Forces, and I can't remember the acronym, but he was telling me he's been like 7-8 tours of Afghanistan. I think he's a colonel now. But it was something like you stop, orient. Like there was 4 things that you're trained to do. Because then I asked him, I said, if you're in Afghanistan, you hear a gunfire. What do you do? And he's like, boom, boom, think, respond.
The OODA loop.
Yeah, that's it. Say it again. What are the
OODA
words?
loop. Oh my gosh, you're going to test me on this one. So, and you guys know how I am with acronyms. The OODA loop was easy to remember. I'm hoping our person over here can tell us.
We might have to come back to the 1MC on that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it orient?
So observe, orient, detect, assess, and then it's a loop.
Yeah. So you loop back.
Yeah.
You keep looping.
Yep.
And he told me the philosophy is whoever can do that the fastest will win in the war,
100%.
in a battle, whatever.
Absolutely.
If you can do that faster than the other person,
Hands
you're
down.
set.
Which also means that you have to stay cerebral.
Yes. You really got to use your frontal lobe, which I call in my first book, Wired and Connected, it's your president. I talk to the kids about use your president.
Yeah.
You have to be really focused when you're doing that.
So here, I guess one thing that this calls to mind for me then is I know that students and then also folks who are processing trauma, whether it's a year ago or 30 years ago, there will be things that trigger their anxiety and set them off and set them spiraling really quickly. And we can see that in an 8-year-old, and we can see it in a 28-year-old. We can see it in combat veterans. We can see it in kids who have no noticeable trauma. They just have a genetic precursor
They have a little
be
piglet in
right,
it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, Craig, you have stepped me through both to help me myself as someone for whom anxiety is very present, and also helps students. Short-term ways to address anxiety. I'm talking about like these are like 5 to 10 second interventions. If you could speak to the short-term ones, and then also if you guys can speak sort of collectively to longer-term practices that can help manage the fight, flight, or freeze.
Right. I'll give you a couple quick ways to slow it down or turn it off. But I think when I'm working with students, children, teens, my first objective is to help them be aware of what their temperament is or what their trauma has been or what's in the culture that's affecting them, to just bring awareness. So for a child, I might just say, oh, you're fine. You just have a little extra piglet in you. And so does your mom or your dad. I asked them. And it came from them. Right? Or you got a little more rabbit than other kids. You all get upset. You think somebody cheated at football every time at recess because you got too much rabbit in you.
Yep.
The Winnie the Pooh kids, they're like, oh, he caught the ball. That's great. And they don't care if it was a score for them or not.
Right.
They're just happy he caught the ball. So it's awareness of that. Now, there are ways to turn off your amygdala.
Yeah, you're spinning. You're
So
spinning, you're
deep-
spinning, you're spinning.
The thing with breathing that the parents need to understand, because every parent will go, take 3 deep breaths, honey, okay? In the middle of the trauma, right? Whatever it is. And here's what the kid will do. It's not working.
Right.
And you're like, that's not deep breathing. And so it will turn it off, but you have to practice every day. So, either in the classroom or you as a family, you do 15 minutes of breath work a day, teach visualization. I personally love Wim Hof. I don't know if any of you follow Wim Hof.
I love Wim Hof.
I've been a Wim Hofer for 6 years now. I learned his method up at a studio off Tennyson pre-COVID, a long time ago, and learned the breath and visualization. And so I'll share that with the kids.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Let's put that in the show
Wim
notes.
Hof and now he's like becoming big.
Yeah.
He's really gotten big.
Well, and he's had people gravitate towards hot and cold training.
And then you do the cold
plunge.
baths,
I love
I
cold
love
plunges.
Me too. Yeah. So that's the other trick that the kids love it. Is I just look at them and say, next time you're mad on the playground or you're worried, like at the test, go into the bathroom, put the water as cold as you get in your palms, and put it on your temples and splash it across your face. And that triggers what's called the vasoconstriction response. And I'll give you an easy to understand example. But when your cortisol levels go off and when you're getting anxious and mad, where's the energy going? Legs and arms. You're getting it ready to freeze, fight, flight. All your blood flow and oxygen is in your extremities. When your brain has thermometers that run out of your temples and across your cheeks. And when it senses cold and wet, it thinks you've just fallen into, like, maybe broke through the ice in a lake or a pond or in a stream.
Jumped in the pond, dude.
And it's afraid you're going to freeze. So instantly, it shuts off the blood vessels to your arms and legs. So all the blood flow and the oxygen now is in your core and your brain. Because the brain understands I can lose a finger or two to hyperthermia and still live. But if I lose the heat in my core, you're done. And that's what the whole Wim Hof thing is based on. The way to experience it, and some of your audience will get this one if you remember, like up here in the mountains or even in Denver in the wintertime, you're in a hot tub or you're in the heated pool. And then you jump out and you roll around in the snow. And when you jump back in, what's it feel like? Do you remember when you're a kid doing that?
Pins and needles.
It's pins and needles. It's tingling. And what that is, when you're in the snow, those blood vessels close. When you get back in the hot water, they all burst open like popcorn, pins and needles.
Well, it's fantastic. So when I do my cold plunges, and I've been doing them long enough now, in my head, and you were with me the last time I did one.
That's true.
And I get in, and I know it's going to be, I think it was at 40 degrees, 37, 40 degrees, something like that. And I get in, and I know without even looking at a clock, my body's going to be in some pain until this threshold reaches. And as soon as that threshold reaches, my body just lets go. And then after that, I'm usually quite
fine.
comfortable. But it's that first 2 minutes for me, it's like about a minute and a half-ish, and then my body lets go of it.
Yeah.
And then all the way up to 2 minutes, and I'll stay in for 3 minutes, but between 2 and 3, right in the last 30 seconds, I start to shiver. Yeah. But none of that happens until then.
You can turn that off sooner. And it's I cross my arms like this, and I visualize. So I do and I visualize that there's a campfire in my chest. And when I'm blowing, the fire's raging. And with that, you can turn it off pretty quick. And I just started doing where you get in the meat locker, frozen, the cold meat locker that's like 200 degrees. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about a sauna?
No, this is cold. It's like a cold sauna.
Cryotherapy. There
I did it twice this.
Thank you, Malibu Keith.
Obviously, Malibu Keith.
We're up ahead all points north where they have all that kind of stuff. So thanks.
It was incredible. I did it. I was training for the triple bypass this summer for my bike, which is 120 miles, 11,000 feet of elevation. And I had a couple times my muscles were so inflamed and sore. And I did that. And you're only in there like 35, 40 seconds.
Yeah.
It's cold. But, I just did and you feel great.
Well, and so if you could speak a little bit more to this, is that breathing or that meditation, if you will, it's not easy to do. You kind of have to figure that part out. And a lot of the reason why I think this is so valuable is because when you do the cold plunges, you're getting the feedback pretty quickly, right? And if you see somebody that's not used to doing that work, you're going to see them kind of do what the kid you were saying about earlier, where they're going to start hyperventilating. Yeah. But if you have somebody that knows exactly what they're supposed to pay attention to and what they're supposed to do, the breathing tends to be able to be their support system as to how to cool the system.
Right. And how to turn off that anxiety. Or another good word to just use is stress. Because the amygdala is the source of the stress that triggers the cortisol. And then you want to fight, flight, or freeze. So the anxiety or anger. So it's better just to talk about feeling stressed. And when you're stressed, do you lean more towards the piglet? Do you more towards Eeyore or rabbit, right? But it's helping the kids be aware of that. But then it takes a lot of practice. So to actually practice some deep breathing, practice some cold exposure. It's hard. I've had a few teens be able to follow Wim Hof. He has an app, WHM, and you can use it for mental health. I use it for endurance, sports performance. Yeah. I've had a few that have done it. Kids are pretty spontaneous. They're in the moment. Hey, let's play. Yeah. Squirrel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a squirrel.
So you were so articulate bringing up right when we started about these contributing factors to rising cases of anxiety and depression, not only among our teenage population, but if you look at mental health and you look at suicide as a marker, whether you're looking at the whole population, the veteran population, the teen population, I wonder, I would be really curious to hear your take on this obviously we could talk for hours, but as we wrap this up, what changes that could either happen on a societal level, or thinking about your book, Shame-Free Parenting, what are some changes that, we're all dads, right? Yeah. What are changes that we can make even in our home to help our kids managing stress? Yeah,
I love it. And I'm a dad too.
Yeah, man.
Our youngest one just turned 18. We have 45 down to 18 and 2 grandkids.
Crazy.
And I took the 3.5-year-old fishing the other day. And he's a boy's boy. He's very energetic. He tangled up that line 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, he did.
So you as a parent, you always want to be aware of you, right? What are your triggers? When do you know when you've had a stressful day? And then you tell your kids. You probably have memories of this yourself. For my dad, we could always tell when he was stressed because he had a tic, and he would crinkle his forehead. I can't even really do it. Yours goes in, but his would go like this way. Yeah. Oh, now that's creepy. He'd be sitting there in the lounge chair, and that head would be scrunching up, and you knew that was not the time to ask for more allowance or to use the car. That he had a bad day, right? Now, a lot of times we'll come home and we'll be like, I had a really rough day. And then you let your kids know. Or if there was something you were sort of triggered by that might make you a little more edgy, let your kids know, right? It's no problem to hand off the responsibilities. If you have a spouse, you hand off the responsibilities to your spouse if you really can't do it right then. The other is parents have bought into, and there is what's called immediate reinforcement. There's a puppy here at the studio. When you're training a puppy, you need to reinforce positive or negative, either, treat for positive reinforcement pretty immediately, right? But things can always wait. You don't have to respond to everything every second and be on top of it. Your kid can hang until you're calmed down again, right? Until you're self-composed, right? Now I can handle it. I always have a sticky note by my computer with my daughter, and it would say mirror, which would remind me that when she has ADHD, and I can't tell you how many assignments we've missed. She's missed or lost 4 car accidents the first year she was driving. And I'd want to just, right? But I got really good at when she would be crying or whatever, at mirroring back to her. It really is hard being responsible for yourself, isn't it? Now, the other part of me want to say, why the F can't you get the homework turned in, right?
Yep.
But I just go, well, you won't have your phone for the next week because those assignments weren't turned in. And she'd fuss. I mean, I know it's hard to be responsible for yourself, isn't it? It's not much fun, isn't it? Now, am I super dad like that all the time? No. After 9 o'clock, I am done. My wife, fortunately, knows that. She takes over. I can't deal with anything after 9 o'clock. At my age, I'm cooked.
I think the modeling piece is just so important. And with the mirroring of being able to say, I need a break.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm overwhelmed by the course of the day. I've had this happen and this happen. And, we've had very intensive moments over the course of the day. And so like, I'm a little edgy.
Yes. When do you need a break? If my wife says to me, you should go for a bike ride or a swim, there's times it's the same with alcohol. Women always notice your nonverbal micro stuff, and she knows when I should stop. Before I think I'm fine. I'm like, I've only had 2 beers. What do you mean? And she's like, well, I can see it in your face. And she's right. And same with stress. And because females read nonverbal much better than males, they're really good at it. And so when she tells me that, then I know, okay, I guess I'm kind of stressed, even though I'm not aware of it.
For me, it's the boys. Like my boys will be like, "Dad, are you okay?" I'm always like, "Oh."
So that's
same.
Fine.
Just the other day,
Fine.
I'm driving, and I don't do a whole lot of driving with my son in the car, but we've been moving around doing some things. And what does he do? Hey, Dad, it's okay. Just breathe.
Right.
And I was like,
I just breathe.
and I'm just like,
Breathe.
Donnie, you're a man. You're a man.
that
And
is.
I love it. One of the pieces too that you're talking about that I thought was fantastic is I have talked to my son about, hey, you get the right to be angry, right? You get the right. You get the right to have all of those emotions. Well, what I would like you to do is that when you start to recognize them, take a break, right? And it's mostly so that you don't offend anybody else.
Right, yeah. Or
And
throw
so-
something.
Right. And so I've told him like, hey, call me on it, right? If I don't do it also, then get on me and tell me. And so one of the, you talk about the little sticky thing, and I feel like this is he and I give each other permission
Yes.
to take that break. And like you said, you got to practice it every day. For me, if I'm not in the gym once a day,
Oh,
I'm my mental health is not going to be working correctly. My nervous system doesn't work correctly. And it's funny because I think my son will then start. He tells me to breathe. I know I need to go to the gym.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. The other thing you can, with my son, and Nathaniel and I have gone to the CU Buffalo games with our kids. He used to be in the band at CU.
No way.
So yeah, he was. What'd you play? A saxophone or something? Trumpet. But with my son, when he was about second, third grade, he's a surgeon now. He's 29, and he was struggling with language. And I said, hey, we're going to make a list of words that we don't say. The F word. And I had things like crazy, because as a mental health professional, I didn't want that word used in our house. I didn't hate. I didn't allow that with any of my kids to say hate. That is way too intense, too extreme. And, spit and all that stuff, right? And the agreement was if he said it, he'd have to put a quarter into the jar on the table. If I said one of them, I had to put in $1. Now, I was pretty Winnie the Pooh overall. And so he'd be putting his quarters in until the CU Buffs game.
This is true.
And then one day we're driving home, and my son in the backseat goes, Dad, you owe $12. And out of my mouth, fuck. and then he said, it's 13 now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
but and I said, well, it's just they won the national championship, and now they're just playing terrible. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I said it. I put my $13 in, and then we give the money to the church or the school.
Yeah.
We donate it.
Yeah.
And so you can do that with your kids. So very often you'll find if you have more than one kid, there's one that's a little bit more temperamentally like you that you might rub against each other, or the other one you don't understand because you don't have that in you. So, if your kid was really anxious and you don't identify with anxiety much, it's still stress, but it's a different presentation.
Right.
That part is the part that I can resonate with, the stress part.
Yeah.
Right. And so that
what
helps
if
quite
it
a
comes out as
No, that's
depression, anxiety, or mad? It's the same thing.
Right.
It's stress.
Yep.
But it's helping them identify that, right? And then you can work on that as a family. The other thing with anxiety for kids that I will talk to parents about is you focus on their process, not the content. Okay? So I'll give you an example. let's say little Jason here, we're going to go skiing for the first time.
Terrified.
And he's very nervous,
Yeah.
okay?
The picture I had
So-
with Devon the first time he was skiing, he was miserable.
Yeah, my son was too, my daughter. So, okay, now, honey, we're going to get out of the car, and I want you to think of something you might be anxious about. Not too extreme, but
Yeah. Am I allowed to say it?
yeah.
I'm going to go off the cliff, and that's...
Well, yeah, no. Well, honey, so look right over there. You can see the beginner's slope. It's real soft and smooth. They even have like an escalator track that moves you, and you just kind of slide down.
All right, what if I get caught in the escalator track, though? That's like a machine. I'll get caught up in there.
Now,
Ground
at this
beef.
point, and I love that. So at this point, what a parent wants to do, you try to solve your kid's problem, and you explain it to them. If the kid says, "Oh, you mean I'm just starting on that? I can do that." You're good as gold,
Right.
right? But if they come up with another thing,
Right,
that's when you say, "I think Piglet came on the skiing trip with us. Remember Piglet?
Yeah.
You got to work on Piglet. So we could earn
Yeah.
a couple extra stickers on your chart at home if you could just look at that little hill over there
Yeah.
and just relax. We'll be okay. And I'll go with you on the escalator.
You'll go with me.
Yeah, I'll go
All
with
right.
you. And I'll get extra glove warmers in case you're worried about being cold. And we'll have a hot chocolate when we're done.
I like the hot chocolate idea when we're done.
Yeah, isn't that great?
Thanks for having some
Greatest
hot chocolate.
athlete story.
Not-
You remember
not buying that.
remember Jeremy Bloom? This is not on anxiety. Remember
Yeah.
Jeremy Bloom for the CU Buffs? He was a model.
Yeah.
He was an Olympic skier,
Yep.
played for CU Buffs, played pro football.
Punt returner.
He was this amazing skier, and his grandfather taught him. I heard him interviewed. And he does a nonprofit where it's like people that have some serious need, like their mother's dying in Africa and they don't have enough money to go there or whatever. And then he gives charity money for them to do things.
Okay.
But his grandfather would take the little candy bars, and as they're on the lift, he'd drop them. And as soon as Jeremy got off the lift, he said, "Go get them before somebody else does." And he'd ski down the slope to get the
That's
chocolate.
brilliant.
And you're like, the greatest thing ever. So, positive reinforcement works
Yeah,
for kids.
man.
But that process, so if I kept talking to you about the escalator, then it's going to go to something else. It'll never end. It's an
and
unending
I was sort
rabbit
of
hole.
modeling how
Right.
my anxiety
Yes,
goes.
and
Once it
that's-
gets going,
And it goes deeper and deeper. So
Yeah.
that's when the parent says, focus on their process. Your process is the anxiety process
okay.
of your
So
anxious
how do you break that process?
by identifying it. So just like what I said to you.
Oh, so you're
remember we
letting
have
me
that
know.
sticker chart. So
Yeah,
remember we
yeah,
talked
yeah.
about the Piglet. You have Piglet.
Yep.
And it came from Dad or it came from Mom
Yep.
or Aunt Frida.
Yep.
And we have that little chart because we
Yep.
want you to be aware of it, and then do your deep breathing.
Yeah.
Right. Or even the fact, remember you're working on those stickers.
See,
and you get to go to the CU Buffs game.
we talk so
we go.
much about structure, right?
Yep.
About having tools in place that you don't just say one thing and that one thing is going to fix it. How
And-
everything
and
is a multi-pronged.
Establishing that structure.
Yep.
And structure's key for kids. It's
Right on.
huge. That's chapter 4 in the new book, I believe.
Amazing. So let's do this.
Yeah, I
Craig.
know.
Man, so
I
here,
could
just
do
real
this all
quick.
day.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, we'll have to have you back sometime. Let's have you go through. We'd love to have you with your voice plug what you've got going on.
Oh.
Let us know. Let
Okay.
our listeners know. We're going to put all this in the show notes as well because we've got some great resources from today. And then we'll wrap this segment and we'll come back and we'll finish it up.
Thank you very much. I'm Craig Knippenberg. The practice name's Knippenberg, Patterson, Langley, and Associates, which is miserable to find. So you go to welistentokids.org or .com. welistentokids.com. You can find our website and all the individual family therapy, group therapy, testing, all the stuff we do. I also have a business called Knippenberg Education. So I do consulting for public and private schools. And where my podcast is through that business. And it's called, Legit Parenting Strategies for Actual Imperfect Parents to Raise Resilient Families. And it's all about you just have to be good enough, and don't worry. And your kid's going to be just fine. There's so little research that says if you do this and this, your kid will be that. There's barely any. You can dope them down, for sure. If you're abusive, your kid's not going to get to where they were. If they don't have clothing, food, health care, education, they're going to be less. But beyond that, you'll be fine as a parent. Your kids will be fine too. They won't even remember half that stuff. My first book was called Wired and Connected, and it's a brain-based perspective on social, emotional, and behavioral development for grades K through 6. And it's stuff that any parent can understand because I teach the same stuff to kids. So kids understand the parts of their brain, how it works, and it's really helping kids be the owner of their brain and taking responsibility versus relying on the parents all the time, right? And as a parent, you want them to be independent. That's a big one for kids today. And then my new book, based on the podcast, but expand a little bit more, is Shame-Free Parenting, Raising Resilient Families During Times of Hardship, Guns, and Social Media. And I just, day after day, kids traumatized by school shootings, the access kids have to guns in this country is obscene. And I'm a gun owner. I've hunted my whole life. I grew up with it. But it really is traumatizing for kids. And you got climate change, you got COVID, and social media. In my podcast, I did several episodes on TikTok, all the stuff that kids find. And it's brutal. Stuff we never had to deal with. So that's
you?
I guess that. Thanks for having me on. It was really cool. You guys rock.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for everything.
This
over
is
the years,
awesome.
man. Craig's been a mentor of mine for as long as I can remember.
Well, I've always enjoyed you and you, Jason, too. And we've met twice now. And
We have.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
But we've had a lot of meaningful moments over the years, and just fabulous.
Terrific, Craig.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks so much. Hey, listen, we're going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, we'll check in with 1MC, and we will wrap up episode 7 of Harder Than Healing. Good dog, bad dog. It's the anxiety episode.
Plus by APN is an official sponsor of the Harder Than Healing podcast. Plus by APN treats the root causes of mental health issues with neurotechnology like deep TMS, ketamine-assisted therapy, and stellate ganglion blocks, so you can get relief from symptoms and find long-term healing. Schedule a free consultation and find your treatment match at plusapn.com. That's PLUSAPN.com.
All right, so during the show, we talked about Wim Hof and some of his breathing techniques and different things. And Donald, you mentioned Wim Hof. What do you have for us on that?
Yeah, so when we were talking earlier, it was this, short-term, long-term kind of ways to deal with anxiety. And we started talking a little Wim Hof, a little breathing and that kind of jazz. And so Wim Hof has a whole bunch of stuff out there. So yeah, definitely go into the show notes. But one of the things that I find very helpful with my veterans is the breathing stuff. And so I actually had this, we, if you can believe it, used to do yoga in a bowling alley. And we had to do this yoga in a bowling alley because when COVID hit, it was like, okay, so where do we go, right? We'd have to have enough space so that we could do this yoga. And so I became a yoga teacher during COVID, which is fantastic because I never even actually went to a yoga studio. And to become a yoga teacher and never be in a yoga studio is kind of interesting. But so there I am, I'm teaching yoga. And so the way I teach yoga, so everybody can know if you ever come and see me, this is what's going to happen. I start off with about 5 to 7 minutes worth of breathing at the very beginning. It's more like a breath to meditation kind of thing. And I had a veteran in particular that very anxious, very tense human being. And he ultimately said that he was having a lot of problems sleeping.
And this to me sounds like I can relate to this. This is a guy who's laying down and that guard dog is freaking out.
Big time.
And there's not a relationship with that guard dog. It's just, oh my gosh, put it in the cage, and it's still barking, and put it in the cage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that Craig said too, is that he was struggling with sleep. So this guy tells me, I'm getting like 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. And so I asked him, so why aren't you sleeping? And he did. It is the guard dog kind of stuff. He's like, my mind starts spinning. I got these ideas of what I'm supposed to do tomorrow, and I can't let that go. Mm-hmm. And so, okay. So I was like, yes, well, come to yoga. We'll see what happens. Okay. Sounds good. Shows up, and we get through the first 5 or 6 minutes of a whole lot of breath. We do some other stuff in between, of course, a little bit of yoga, a little bit of breath to movement, that kind of stuff. And then we do a couple balance poses. And then I typically spend about 12 to 15 minutes, which is a long time for a lot of people, in something we call Shavasana, or resting pose. And so this is the end of it when you're like, I did all this work and now I get to rest. A lot of people don't. I mean, Nathaniel and I did yoga just a couple of weekends ago. And when we did, they're like, okay, now you're in your resting pose.
Yeah.
And then you were like, done.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, oh no, no, we got to take advantage of that. So we go into resting pose, and I do about 6 minutes of a body scan. And in a body scan, you're always looking for stress, right? You can say anxiety, but for some other people, it's something else, but it doesn't matter one way or another. You're starting from head to toe, and you do find your stress, breathe it out. Breathe back in, find some more stress, breathe it out. And so we do this for 5 or 6 minutes. And it's funny. Well, so I tell you at the beginning of this, by the way, I tell you, we are going to spend an intentional 2 to 3 minutes of silence. After we're done with the body scan, I am going to give silence. Don't worry. I'm going to bring you back. We'll go through the 5 senses. I'll reawaken the body, and then, then we'll be done. However, there's going to be 2 or 3 minutes of silence. 6 minutes goes. I finish with, what I finish off with is kind of right around the heart, and set some intention for the meditation. And all of a sudden I hear this. And I look around a little bit, and, some of the other guys are like, what is that? And everybody's, it's yoga. So we're all quiet, whatever else. And I'm looking over, and now, mind you, this guy said when he came in, Donald, you're going to ask me to close my eyes at some point. I can't sleep, man. I'm not closing my eyes. And I was like, don't worry. Soft gaze across the room.
That's a really interesting thing to say, though.
Yeah.
Right? No, but I can't close my eyes.
Yeah.
Right?
That I'm not closing my eyes. My guard dog is constantly barking. I can't close my eyes. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. Just a soft gaze somewhere. He's like, cool. Rolls his eyes, soft gaze, got it. So anyways, 6 minutes into it and snoring. And it's funny because I do my little piece of quietness, 2-3 minutes, start bringing people back. All right, guys, gals, open up your eyes, wiggle your toes, the 5 senses. That takes, a couple more minutes. Have people roll over onto their sides. He's still snoring. People are sitting up. We're breathing again. We're doing everything again. People are almost ready to clap. And I was like, hey, we're not clapping. Okay. Yeah. And you still hear him snoring. And then it's funny because everybody's leaving the room. And I was like, hey guys, it's fine. Go ahead and leave. I got a solid 5 minutes after this, maybe more like 15 minutes after this. The kid's still sleeping in 10 minutes. I'll wake him up. Next thing you know, everybody's out of the room. I'm sitting there and probably playing on my cell phone or something at that point. And all of a sudden he's like, wait, what just happened? And I was like, you know what just happened? You just woke up. So you must have been doing. He's like, well, I was asleep. Yeah, I'm coming back every day. I was like, I'm not here every day. I'm coming back every week. I'm doing this from now on. This is it. This is all I'm doing. And so it was, I will say that I have seen that in more than one place. I have seen another Vietnam veteran when doing what we would call yoga nidra, who has a very severe startle response. Deep into yoga nidra, door slams, he didn't budge. And so this is my long-winded way of saying there are some fantastic, the brain will do some pretty amazing tricks. It is the trickster, but when you can get it engaged, when you are intentional,
yes,
right? When you spend time with it, you can start to teach it all these tricks so that it doesn't trick you anymore, right? That you keep it engaged. I'll say this last piece about this. If you are looking for distraction, you're going to find it. Yeah. But if you're intentional, your responsibility is to find focus. So that's not to say like, hey, if you could just focus, but instead to say like, I'm not looking for distraction. I'm going to focus on something, right? So if that's breathing, focus on breathing, right? If that's hanging out with your guard dog, hang out with your guard dog. But if you're saying like, okay, I need to box this thing up so that I can not think about it, we're going to not be able to do that. If I tell you guys right now, don't do this thing, right? Don't think about the purple elephant, everybody's going to think about a purple elephant. But if instead I say, do think about the purple elephant, well, now we're onto something.
Right.
So let's be intentional. The focus thing is a little whatever, fuzzy. But if you're intentional,
the focus works for me though. I mean, because everybody is different in this game, right? Whether it's ADHD, whether it's anxiety, depression, dysthymia, whatever version of happy you have, we are all going to be different in this. And so my version of focus is very different than somebody who's able to sit down in a chair for more than 5 minutes.
And I feel like the sort of universal takeaway here, whether you're thinking about like the conversation we had before Nip, or when Craig's sitting with us, or this here, the story of the dude getting some Z's in a bowling alley, right? Is that when you're grappling with anxiety, it feels helpless. It's like a hangover. You can't remember like not having a hangover. When you're in the grips of anxiety, you can't remember not being anxious. And just knowing that A, there are short-term tools out there, B, there are practitioners who understand this, and C, there are lifestyle choices that you can make that will dramatically improve the relationship you have with your guard dog. I mean, that, I will just say, for me personally, I find that incredibly inspiring and heartening, and I hope that all our listeners know, and I know a lot of you are grappling with your relationship with your guard dog out there. You're worth the healing. So that's it, man. I think that's episode 7 in the can. Harder Than Healing. I'm Jason Lemire. I'm the playwright.
I'm Nathaniel, and I'm the clinician.
I'm Don Malloy, the Green Beret.
Jumping out of planes, eating snakes.
Hi, my name is Watika Ling, and I'm the CEO of Warrior Now. And I want to thank you for listening to Harder Than Healing, produced in partnership with All Points North and Warrior Now. This podcast is recorded on the APN campus in Edwards, Colorado. Warrior Now is a nonprofit organization that provides veterans a whole health approach through peer-to-peer services. For more information, you can contact us at info@warriornow.org or pod@harderthanhealing.com. You can also find us on all social media platforms at Warrior Now. Like, share, or subscribe for new episodes. Thank you.